Hey everyone, today I am in Aikens, Oklahoma at the Aikens Cemetery, and this is just outside of Sallisaw, Oklahoma, and we're here to look at a famous outlaw, Charles Arthur Floyd, who is otherwise known as Pretty Boy Floyd. He's buried in here, so we're going to have a look at his grave. As you come in the cemetery, if you'll just keep driving straight until this road ends, and there's that little pavilion there, you can just park along here, walk straight right over that way, and you'll see where Charles Floyd's grave is. Now, Pretty Boy Floyd was a notorious bank robber, and he's known for robbing tons of banks, and it's not really sure how many banks that he actually robbed. It's one of those Depression era criminals where he got the nickname of this area. There's a bunch of hills in through here called Cookson Hills, and he was nicknamed by the people in this area the Robin Hood of Cookson Hills. This is the grave of Charlie Pretty Boy Floyd. And as you take a closer look at his headstone, you'll see these kind of little chips here. What this is, people that have visited this grave have chipped off pieces of the headstone. And you can see where they've even taken it out of the letter right there. But that's something that you don't want to do. You want to be respectful and not take that, but people have taken little stones and chips just so they have a souvenir of it. But anyways, this is where he's buried, and as you walk through the cemetery, you'll see many members of his family, and they're not just here, they're in other places as well. So it's a rather large family. But Charlie was born in Georgia, and then his father heard that cotton farming was very profitable here in Oklahoma. So he moved his family here, and they were sharecroppers, and it was tough times because the Dust Bowl was happening here and farming was tough, and it's kind of what set him in motion that he did not want to farm, that there was probably a better way of making a living out there. So one of his first things that he actually gets in trouble for is stealing cookies. And then he was quite the prankster. They actually had a river baptism here. And while people were getting baptized in the river, he actually went around and switched everybody's babies in the carriages, because everybody kept their babies in there while they were sleeping. So it wasn't until the next day that they were able to switch the babies back to the way that they were supposed to be, with the rightful owners and the rightful parents. So he always kind of had a little trickster to him. But his first case of being in trouble with the law was here locally, when he decided to steal a bunch of money from a local post office. Stole about $350 in pennies. And of course he was arrested, but his father was actually able to kind of get him out of that trouble. And so everybody loved the Floyd family here in this area. They thought highly of them. Nobody hated this family. They were well loved and well liked, always have been. And so that was his first brush with the law. Then he ends up getting married, and of course he has a son, and he then gets in trouble with the law again up in Kansas City. He is involved with a payroll robbery, and that time he gets caught and sentenced to 5 years in prison. He serves about 3.5 years and is out on parole. During that time period, his wife divorced him. And of course, when he got out of prison, they did try to rekindle that relationship, but it did not work out. Floyd then went and back up into the Kansas City area. It's during this time period that he starts his bank robberies. He hit a lot of rural type banks that didn't expect things to happen like that, but he was highly successful at it, probably one of the best that's ever been out there at it. And he would take them, rob their banks. He was also involved in the murder of a Tulsa police officer. And he went all around up through Ohio, Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and robbed banks. Now, it's unsure how many banks he actually robbed. The problem with it is so many people wanted to admit that they were robbed by Pretty Boy Floyd rather than some little 2-bit robber, that they credited him with bank robberies when he actually probably didn't rob those banks. So the truth is, we'll never really know how many bank robberies Pretty Boy Floyd was involved with. Furthermore, we'll never know how many murders he was involved with. There's definitely one murder that was a police officer in the Tulsa area. There are many more that he's been associated with, or at least blamed. The Kansas City massacre took place, and the FBI blamed him for that. That event, combined with John Dillinger being killed, put Pretty Boy Floyd at the top of the list of the FBI. This was during a time period where the FBI was trying to grow, trying to get firearms, trying to establish themselves under J. Edgar Hoover. The Kansas City massacre put Floyd at the top of the list. In fact, J. Edgar Hoover declared that Pretty Boy Floyd was public enemy number 1. At this point, people were looking all over for Floyd, especially the law enforcement, and more specifically the FBI. Floyd and his accomplice at the time, Adam Ritchie, had been hiding out in the New York area for about a year. They then made their way back west across Ohio, where during some bad weather, they actually hit a pole. It did some damage on the car, and their girlfriends who were also with them figured that they would take the car into town and have repairs made. And Floyd and Ritchie stayed by the roadside with blankets. It's at this time that a citizen drove by and saw these men in nice silk suits on the roadside, became suspicious, and called the sheriff. The sheriff came out and immediately arrested Ritchie. Floyd went on the run, and he ended up going to a lady's house there, not too far from there, in the East Liverpool area, where he told a lady, after he went up to the doorstep, that he had been out squirrel hunting, which she immediately knew it was a lie, because who squirrel hunts when they're wearing a suit? But he admitted that he was lost, and then he had later admitted that he had been drinking and stuff like that. Anyways, she cooked a breakfast for him. In those days, nobody turned anyone around or anyone away that had come up and was hungry. So she cooked him a breakfast, and he made the remark that that breakfast was fit for a king, and he paid her $1 for that breakfast, which in those days was a lot of money. He asked her for a ride into town, and she said she could not, but she enlisted the help of her brother. It was at that point that Charles got in the car with her brother, and as they started to back out the driveway and go, the law enforcement was at the end of that driveway. And so, of course, Floyd got out of the vehicle. And this is where the story takes a turn, because there's much debate as to who killed him and who was present and how it happened. There was a police officer that shot him in the arm, and Floyd dropped, and Floyd got up, and then the police officer shot him again, but shot him just to wound him so that they could apprehend him and keep him alive. The FBI story is that they shot him and killed him as he kind of turned and he was going to draw a pistol on them. Either way, on that day, October 22nd, 1934, in East Liverpool, Ohio, Floyd died. Now, Floyd was considered by many people in Oklahoma and around even in other areas as sort of a hero. Like I said, there were a lot of people that considered him the Robin Hood of Cookson Hills. The time period in which Pretty Boy Floyd was involved with many of these bank robberies, Oklahoma had been in a dust bowl, and it was the Great Depression. Many of the farms that were in the area were owned by banks that held their notes. So there were urban legends, these are not confirmed, but that Pretty Boy Floyd would break into these banks, rob them, steal the notes and burn them, rip them up, whatever. And then people that would otherwise lose their farms because they couldn't make the payments due to the hard times would otherwise be scot-free. So since these notes were actually discarded, the bank had no proof that there was ever even a loan on the farm property. Therefore, people didn't have to worry about paying their loans or being in debt to the bank. Now, these are times where there were criminals, there were bank robbers like Floyd, or there were banks which were also seen as criminals, as they were taking people's land, taking people's property, and then those people had no way of making a living at all. It was thought that the banks were actually trying to take small farms and take them of their own and make money of their own that way. So, in many people's eyes, Floyd was a hero. After Floyd's death in Ohio, many of the law enforcement posed next to his body, taking pictures, touching him, all things of that sort. After he got done with all of that, he came here back to Oklahoma, back to the Sallisaw and Aikens area, where in this particular cemetery right here, it's considered by many in the state of Oklahoma to be one of the largest that has ever occurred. Estimates vary, but range anywhere from 10,000 to 40,000 people. Either way, this cemetery was so crowded that the family themselves had trouble getting up here to pay their respects to their fallen family member. It's even said that many people came here and took picnic lunches and sat their sandwiches on top of headstones and ate their lunch and fought over the close spots so they could possibly get a close-up view of Pretty Boy Floyd. It posed a problem because the family couldn't get near. It is completely inconsiderate. The problem is, even today, there are still people that are inconsiderate because this is not the only marker that has been provided by Floyd. And as you can see, the chips here on the corners of this marker, those are from people chipping off pieces of it so they can have it as a souvenir. So here it's been all this many years later, and there are still people being inconsiderate to the family. There's a lot of folklore, a lot of legends involved with Pretty Boy Floyd, and he is one of the more popular bank robbers of his time period, and definitely probably one of the more popular of Oklahoma. Like I said, there's a lot of family members here that you'll see, and this family was loved by many in the area, and many of the Floyd family members are veterans. So you'll see a lot of markers that say World War I and stuff like that. One of the interesting things is this marker right here. And if you'll notice on here, from 1949 to 1970, E.W. Floyd was the sheriff of Sequoyah County. Now that's the county that we are in right here in the Aikens and Sallisaw area. E.W. Floyd was the brother of Pretty Boy Floyd. So this family was so well liked that here he was, he could hold an elected office. like I said, many of the members of the family were well respected, well loved, and they did their duty to the country. But for some reason, Pretty Boy Floyd just went down the wrong path. A lot of times, many of us maybe think about doing something but don't act on it, and he's one of the few people that acted on what he thought about doing. These are some more members of the Floyd family here, and I'm not quite sure how these are related, but as you notice right here where it says Floyd right there, and there's pictures there, you can actually see the resemblance of her to Pretty Boy Floyd. Interesting spot here. As you visit, definitely encourage you to visit Pretty Boy Floyd, but please do not chip the marker as so many have. The families are responsible for these markers, and they do have to pay for a new one when this gets damaged beyond recognition. So Pretty Boy Floyd became somewhat of a beloved folklore legend. In fact, Woody Guthrie actually sang a song about him and told about how there were criminals that held the 6-shooter and criminals that held the pin, which was a reference towards the bankers. Pretty Boy Floyd was very good at robbing banks, and he was confident about his ability to rob the banks and never get caught. And he actually robbed the Sallisaw State Bank. He set a specific time and a date for his grandfather to show up, all his friends, and anyone else that wanted to witness it. On November 1st, 1932, Charlie had told his friends that he was going to rob the Sallisaw State Bank, and that bank used to sit on that corner right across the road in that empty lot. When Charlie showed up to do this at the certain time that he designated, there were crowds on both sides of the street, and they actually clapped and cheered him on. He then went next door into the barber shop and spoke with the barber and the people in there and told him that he and his gang were going to rob that bank and for them not to call the police. So Charlie went ahead, went in the bank, robbed it just as normal, and when he came out, he ended up driving away down the road, tossing out money and coins to the citizens of Sallisaw, in which they still cheered him on and collected the money, shared in the wealth. This is right where the Sallisaw State Bank used to stand. So we are now standing in the location where that bank once stood. Like I said, there is nothing left of it now. And it used to be a 2-story building that would stand here. Can you picture people standing over there cheering him on as he robbed the bank? So I hope you enjoyed this video on Pretty Boy Floyd, the location where the bank once stood, and his actual gravesite. If you like these kinds of videos, please hit subscribe. If you liked this video, please hit the thumbs up button. Thank you. We'll see you next time. There's a mural here on the side of the building, and that is the bank that Pretty Boy Floyd robbed in Sallisaw.